The space station hung in the darkness between stars like a massive metal flower. Its 5 arms stretched out in different directions, each one built by a different alien race. This was Concordia, the neutral meeting place where the Galactic Council welcomed new species into their community. Ambassador walked through the gleaming corridors of the station. His tall, thin body moved with the careful grace of his people. Behind him followed other important aliens from across the galaxy. They were here to meet the species that wanted to join their council, the humans from a small blue planet called Earth. The meeting room was huge, with a round table that could seat dozens of different alien forms. Took his place at the head, his pale blue skin seeming to glow under the soft lights. To his right sat Commander Crystal Song of War from the Empire. She looked like a walking crystal sculpture, her body made of clear, singing stone that rang like bells when she moved. On his left was the representative, a creature that looked like a giant insect with 4 arms and compound eyes that saw in all directions at once. The humans entered the room quietly. Colonel Sarah led their small group, wearing a simple blue uniform with silver stars on her shoulders. She was followed by a few other humans in similar clothes, including one man who carried himself differently from the rest. This was Sergeant First Class, a thick-built man with gray hair and scars on his hands. "Welcome to Concordia," said, his voice smooth and musical like all. "We are honored to meet the representatives of Earth." Colonel nodded and sat down across from him. "Thank you for having us. We're excited to learn about your council and how we might contribute." The formal greetings continued for some time. Each alien species explained their role in the galactic community. They were known for their wisdom and long-term planning. There were master engineers who built the most beautiful structures in the galaxy. There were farmers who fed whole star systems with their advanced growing techniques. "And what does Earth offer?" asked Crystal Song of War, her voice creating soft musical notes. "We're still figuring that out," Colonel said honestly. "We're good at solving problems and adapting to new situations. We learn fast and work together well." Leaned forward. As with all new species, the Council needed to understand Earth's military strength. This was not about starting wars, quite the opposite. Only species that could defend themselves and help protect others were allowed to join the Council. "Tell us about your military forces," he said. "How do you train your warriors?" Colonel looked surprised by the direct question. "Our military training? Well, basic infantry training takes about 13 weeks. Some specializations take longer, maybe 6 months to a year for very advanced roles." The aliens around the table went very quiet. Eyes widened. Among his people, training a basic warrior took 8 standard years. The warrior had to learn not just fighting skills, but also philosophy, strategy, and spiritual discipline. Only after this long process could they be trusted with weapons. 13 weeks. Crystal Song of War's musical voice hit a sharp, surprised note. "Surely you mean 13 years." "No, 13 weeks, Colonel repeated. 3 months give or take." The representative clicked his mandibles together, a sign of confusion. "This cannot be correct. My people grow specialized warrior forms, but this process takes 15 standard years. How can you create effective soldiers in such a short time?" Colonel turned to Sergeant. "You want to field this one?" The older man leaned back in his chair. He had the look of someone who had seen many battles and lived to tell about them. His brown eyes were calm but alert. 13 weeks, he said simply. "Then we give them guns and grenades and send them where they're needed." The silence that followed was so complete that the soft hum of the station's engine seemed loud. Stared at the human sergeant, trying to understand what he had just heard. Guns and grenades to beings with only 13 weeks of training. It seemed like madness. "You give weapons to children?" asked slowly. "Beings with no real training." "They're not children," said. "They're soldiers. Young ones sure, but soldiers all the same." "But how can they be effective?" Crystal Song of War sang, her confusion making her voice sound like broken glass. My people study warfare for 12 years before they even touch a weapon. They must understand the deeper meanings, the connections between mind and body, the spiritual preparation required for combat. Different approaches, Colonel said with a slight smile. Our people tend to learn by doing rather than studying for years first. The ambassador felt a cold fear growing in his chest. Either these humans were lying about their military capabilities, or they were dangerously reckless. Both possibilities worried him greatly. Perhaps, he said carefully, there has been some error in translation. When you say 13 weeks, do you mean some preliminary selection process? Some basic screening before the real training begins? Nope, said. 13 weeks from civilian to soldier. Boot camp, we call it. They come in as regular people, leave as Marines, soldiers, sailors, or... But surely they must have some previous preparation, the representative insisted. Some childhood conditioning, genetic modifications, chemical enhancement. Just regular kids, shrugged. 18, 19 years old mostly. Some older but not many, we take them as they are. Exchanged worried looks with the other aliens. This was unprecedented in galactic history. Every known species required years, sometimes decades, to properly train military personnel. The idea that humans could create effective soldiers in mere weeks suggested either superior technology, biological advantages, or dangerous incompetence. We would like to see a demonstration, announced. Colonel raised an eyebrow. A demonstration. Yes, we need to understand how this is possible. For the safety of all species in the Council, we must evaluate your military methods. The humans looked at each other. Most species guarded their military secrets carefully, sharing nothing with potential allies. Sure, Colonel said. I can arrange for a squad of recent graduates to come here. Would that work? The casual way she agreed to reveal military secrets shocked the aliens even more. Began to wonder what kind of species they were dealing with. 3 days later, stood in the observation deck above Concordia's main training facility. The massive room below could simulate almost any environment, from desert planets to frozen moons to the inside of enemy ships. Right now, it looked like a simple flat area with gray walls and bright lights. Beside him, Crystal's Song of War hummed nervously, her crystal body making soft musical sounds. The representative, who called himself Speaker for Many Voices, clicked his mandibles in a pattern that showed worry. I still cannot believe they agreed to show us their military secrets, Crystal Song of War said. Either they are very confident or very foolish. Nodded. In his long experience, species that readily shared military information were usually either completely helpless or so powerful they didn't care about giving away advantages. He hoped the humans were simply naive. The 3 aliens had spent the last few days discussing what they expected to see. Based on the short training time, they assumed human soldiers would be barely functional. Perhaps the humans used some kind of mind control or chemical enhancement that they were hiding. Or maybe their weapons were so advanced that training didn't matter. My people have observed human behavior through long-range sensors, Speaker for Many Voices said, his compound eyes glittering. They seem chaotic and disorganized. Their young ones play violent games and compete constantly. It appears to be a naturally aggressive species. Aggressive but untrained could be very dangerous, mused. Perhaps that explains their confidence. They rely on natural violence rather than skill. The door to the observation deck opened and Colonel entered, followed by Sergeant. Both humans looked relaxed and confident. The transport just docked, Colonel announced. The squad will be here in a few minutes. I should mention they just finished basic training 2 weeks ago. This is about as fresh as they get. 2 weeks ago, felt his throat tighten. These humans were bringing completely new soldiers to demonstrate their capabilities, warriors who had been civilians less than 4 months ago. "Are you certain this is wise?" he asked. "Perhaps more experienced soldiers would better represent your military." "These kids will do fine," Sergeant said. "Besides, you wanted to see how we train soldiers in 13 weeks. These are exactly that." The doors to the training floor opened below them. 8 young humans walked in and almost gasped at what he saw. They were children, or at least they looked like children to his eyes. The tallest couldn't have been much more than 6 feet tall, and several looked barely out of adolescence. They wore matching gray uniforms and carried equipment bags, but they walked and talked like youngsters on a school trip rather than warriors. "Those are soldiers." Crystal Song of War's voice hit a high, disbelieving note. One of the humans, a young female with short, dark hair, was laughing at something another had said. A male human was juggling 3 small objects while walking. Another was looking around the training facility with obvious excitement, pointing at things and making comments to his companions. "Jackson, quit fooling around," called out a slightly older human female with corporal stripes on her uniform, but she was smiling as she said it. Compared these humans to his own warriors. A soldier of equivalent training would be at least 40 years old, moving with perfect discipline and grace. Their minds would be focused entirely on the mission ahead, their bodies in perfect physical condition from decades of training. These humans looked like they had just come from some kind of recreational gathering. "The one is Private Jackson," Colonel said, pointing to a young male human who had stopped juggling and was now examining the walls of the training room. "He's 19. The dark-haired woman is Private, no relation to me. She's 20. Corporal Williams there is the squad leader. She's the old one at 22. 22 was old. A warrior of 22 would still be considered a child, decades away from being trusted with real weapons. "What about their physical preparation?" Speaker for Many Voices asked. "They appear soft." It was true. Compared to alien warriors, the humans looked small and weak. Private Jackson couldn't have weighed more than 180 Earth pounds. Private was even smaller. None of them showed the massive muscle development or cybernetic enhancements that other species use to create effective soldiers. "They're in good shape," Sergeant said. "Standard military fitness requirements, but we don't build super soldiers or anything like that." The squad had gathered in the center of the training floor now, and Corporal Williams was talking to them in a casual way. Couldn't hear the words, but he could see their body language. They were relaxed, alert, but not particularly focused or disciplined by galactic standards. "I must ask," said carefully, "what kind of combat experience do these soldiers have?" "None," Colonel replied. "This is their first assignment after basic training. No combat experience, no years of conditioning, no advanced technology visible in their equipment. Was beginning to think this demonstration would prove that humans were not ready for galactic community membership." "What exactly do you want them to demonstrate?" Sergeant asked. Crystal Song of War gestured toward the training floor. "Standard tactical scenarios, the kind of challenges any soldier should be able to handle. We have programs designed for different skill levels." "Start with something appropriate for new soldiers," suggested. He didn't want to embarrass the humans too badly. Colonel spoke into a communication device. "Williams, you're going to run some tactical scenarios. Standard stuff, nothing too fancy." Down on the training floor, Corporal Williams nodded and gathered her squad. The 8 humans formed a loose circle and could see them talking and gesturing. It looked more like a discussion than a military briefing. "They don't seem very disciplined," Speaker for Many Voices observed. "My warriors would maintain proper formation and attention during briefings." "Different style," said with a small smile. The training facility's computer began generating the first scenario. The walls flickered and changed, creating the image of a ruined city street. Enemy positions appeared as glowing red markers that only the aliens could see from their observation position. This was a simple scenario designed for first-year students at alien military academies. The soldiers needed to advance down the street while avoiding enemy fire from 3 buildings. The standard approach was to move slowly and carefully, using cover and suppressing fire to advance methodically. Expected the young humans to either hesitate in confusion or charge forward recklessly. Instead, they did something he had never seen before. Private Jackson looked at the street for about 10 seconds, then turned to his squad and said something. Immediately, 3 of them moved to different positions, while the others started discussing something with animated hand gestures. "What are they doing?" Crystal Song of War asked. "Planning," Sergeant said, but his smile was getting bigger. Within 2 minutes, the humans had split into 3 groups and were moving in completely different directions. This wasn't any standard tactical approach that knew. They seemed to be making up their strategy as they went along. Private was climbing up the side of a building in a way that looked both dangerous and improvised. Jackson and 2 others were doing something with their equipment that couldn't identify. The remaining soldiers were moving toward the enemy positions in a zigzag pattern that seemed random. "This is chaos," speaker for many voices clicked. "They have no discipline, no coordination." But as watched more carefully, he began to see that there was a pattern to their movements. The 3 groups were working together, even though they weren't following any standard tactical doctrine. And they were moving fast, much faster than trained alien soldiers would in the same situation. "How long would your warriors take to complete this scenario?" Colonel asked quietly. "Thought about it. With proper planning and execution, perhaps 30 minutes. "Let's see how these kids do," she said. The first explosion echoed through the training facility. The explosion came from the left side of the simulated street. Private Jackson had somehow created a diversion blast that sent simulated enemies scrambling for new cover. While they were moving, Private dropped from the building she had climbed, landing behind the enemy positions with surprising grace. Leaned forward against the observation window. This wasn't following any tactical pattern he recognized, but it was working. The enemy positions that should have taken 30 minutes to clear were already falling apart after just 5 minutes. "How did they coordinate that?" Crystal Song of War asked, her voice creating confused harmonic notes. "I saw no signals, no communication." "They talked for 2 minutes, Sergeant pointed out. That was their coordination." 2 minutes? Warriors spent hours planning similar operations. The idea that effective tactics could be developed in casual conversation seemed impossible. The demonstration continued, and it got stranger. When the computer generated the second scenario, a hostage rescue in a space station, the human squad looked at it for maybe 30 seconds before Private Jackson raised his hand. "Can we use the ventilation system?" His young voice echoed in the training facility. The computer paused. This wasn't a question that had been asked before. The ventilation system was part of the environment, but not designed to be part of the solution. "Sure," came Colonel's voice over the speaker. Within minutes, half the squad had disappeared into air vents that hadn't even noticed. The other half started what looked like a completely unrelated activity. They began making noise and moving around in the open, drawing the simulated enemy's attention. "They split up again," speaker for many voices observed. "This is not proper tactical doctrine. Units should stay together for mutual support." But as they watched, it became clear that the separation was planned. While the simulated enemies focused on the obvious group, the hidden humans emerged from vents throughout the facility. The hostages were secured, and the enemies neutralized in under 10 minutes. The computer immediately generated a third scenario, more complex than anything usually given to new soldiers. A defended fortress with multiple layers of protection and overlapping fields of fire. Expected this to finally stop the humans. This scenario was designed for advanced students with years of training. The proper solution required careful analysis of enemy positions, calculation of firing angles, and precise timing of coordinated attacks. The human squad looked at the fortress for about 20 seconds. "That's pretty solid," Private said to her squad. "Ideas?" "Explosives," Jackson suggested immediately. "Lots of explosives." "Where?" Corporal Williams asked. "Everywhere," another private added helpfully. Was horrified. They were talking about destroying the entire structure rather than carefully neutralizing specific threats. It was crude, wasteful, and dangerous. It was also completely effective. The humans didn't try to solve the defensive puzzle the way it was designed to be solved. Instead, they created so much chaos and destruction that the defensive positions became meaningless. They used their weapons in ways that weren't intended, combined equipment in creative ways, and moved through the environment like it was a playground rather than a battlefield. "This is madness," Crystal Song of War sang, but her tone was more worried than critical now. "They have no respect for proper procedures." "They're getting results," Colonel pointed out. The fourth scenario was a space combat situation where the squad had to defend their ship against boarding parties. Was certain this would stop them. Space combat required understanding of three-dimensional movement, gravity effects, and the complex physics of fighting in confined spaces. The humans treated it like a game. "Ooh, zero gravity," Jackson said excitedly. "I love zero gravity." "Remember, use the walls," Corporal Williams reminded them. "Everything is cover in space." They moved through the simulated ship corridors like they had been born in space. When the enemy boarding parties appeared, the humans were already waiting in positions that shouldn't have been possible to reach. They used the three-dimensional environment in ways that made heads spin. Private actually ran up a wall, pushed off the ceiling, and attacked enemies from above while upside down. Jackson used the ship's own systems against the boarders, causing artificial gravity fluctuations that sent enemies tumbling helplessly through the air. "How are they doing this?" asked quietly. "They have no advanced training in zero-gravity combat." "Actually," Colonel said, "most of them probably played zero-gravity sports in school, and lots of video games with similar environments." These complex tactical skills came from playing games. The fifth scenario was the most challenging yet. A multi-level urban environment with civilian populations, unknown enemy numbers, and constantly changing objectives. It was designed to test every aspect of military training tactics, ethics, adaptability, and decision-making under pressure. The human squad looked at the complex environment with its multiple buildings, crowded streets, and confused civilian populations, waited for them to ask for more briefing time or additional intelligence. Instead, they split up into pairs and scattered in different directions. "Wait," Crystal Song of War called over the speaker. "Don't you want to analyze the situation first? Plan your approach." "We'll figure it out as we go," Jackson called back cheerfully, already heading toward a building full of potential threats. Figure it out as they go, in a complex urban environment with civilian lives at stake. But somehow it worked. Each pair of humans dealt with their section of the scenario independently, making quick decisions and adapting to changing situations. When they encountered unexpected problems, they solved them on the spot. When civilians needed protection, they protected them. When enemies appeared in unexpected places, the humans were ready. Most incredibly, they communicated with each other across the entire area without formal command structures. When one team discovered important information, the others somehow knew about it within minutes. When someone needed help, it appeared before they had to ask for it. "They're thinking together," realized with growing alarm, "like a hive mind but without any formal connection." "No," Speaker for Many Voices corrected, his compound eyes focused intently on the action below. "My people are a hive mind. This is something else. They are individuals who choose to think as one when needed." The implications of that observation sent chills through his body. A hive mind was predictable, controllable, but individuals who could spontaneously coordinate like a single organism, that was something new and potentially dangerous. The scenario ended with all objectives completed, all civilians safe, and all threats neutralized. Total time, 18 minutes. The computer announced that it was out of pre-programmed scenarios at this difficulty level. "Want us to try the advanced training programs?" Jackson asked, looking up at the observation deck. "The ones for experienced soldiers." Exchanged glances with the other aliens. These weren't experienced soldiers. These were children with 13 weeks of training, but they had just completed scenarios that should have taken veteran troops hours to finish. "I think we've seen enough," he said quietly. But even as he spoke, he knew they hadn't seen enough at all. They had seen something that challenged everything the galactic community thought they knew about warfare, training, and the nature of military capability. And these humans had been carrying weapons the entire time. Real weapons, not training simulators. The aliens had been watching children with guns and explosives solve military problems with casual efficiency. The truly terrifying part was that Jackson and his squad looked like they had been having fun. Ambassador paced in his private quarters aboard Concordia, his tall frame casting long shadows in the dim lighting he preferred. The demonstration had ended 3 hours ago, but he couldn't stop thinking about what he had witnessed. His hands shook slightly as he poured himself a cup of Vex tea, the traditional drink for calming nerves. A soft chime announced a visitor. Checked his security display and saw Sergeant standing outside his door, alone. The human's face was serious, more serious than had seen it since their first meeting. "May I come in?" asked when the door opened. "I think we need to talk." Stepped aside, gesturing to a chair that had been adjusted for human proportions. Sat down heavily, looking older than he had just hours before. "You're scared," said. It wasn't a question. Considered denying it, but diplomatic training had taught him that honesty was often the best approach with unknown species. "Yes, what we saw today challenges everything we understand about military training and capability." "Good," said, surprising the ambassador. "You should be scared, but not for the reasons you think." The sergeant leaned forward, his brown eyes serious. "Tell me, Ambassador, what scares you most about what you saw?" Sat across from him, choosing his words carefully. "Your soldiers showed capabilities that should be impossible for beings with such limited training. Either you possess technology we don't understand, or your species has military advantages that could threaten galactic peace." Nodded slowly. "You think we're dangerous because we can make soldiers so quickly. Aren't you?" "That's the wrong question," said. "The right question is, why do you think we made those soldiers?" Frowned. "I don't understand." Stood and walked to the large window that showed the stars beyond the station. "You've been thinking about this all wrong, Ambassador. You keep talking about how we train soldiers in 13 weeks, but that's not what we do." "Then what do you do?" "We don't make soldiers," said quietly. "We just teach them to do it together." The words hung in the air, but still didn't understand. Seemed to sense his confusion and turned back to face him. "Let me ask you something," the sergeant said. "How do your people raise their children?" The question seemed unrelated but answered. "Young are carefully educated from birth. They study philosophy, art, mathematics, and science. They learn discipline and control. By the age of maturity, they are ready to choose their life path." "Peaceful upbringing," observed. "What about physical activity?" "Some exercise for health," admitted, "but nothing competitive or aggressive. We believe competition breeds violence." Nodded. "And the focus on harmony and creation. Their children learn to sing with the crystal formations, to build and create beauty. They grow their young in nurturing pools where they develop their roles for the collective good." "All peaceful," said. all focused on cooperation and avoiding conflict. Of course, said, war is a terrible thing. Why would we train children for it? Was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked, do you know what human children do for fun? The question seemed so random that almost laughed. Play, I assume, like all young beings. They compete, said. From the time they can walk, human children compete. They race each other. They play games where someone wins and someone loses. They create teams and fight mock battles. They challenge each other constantly. That sounds violent and unhealthy, said concerned. Does it, asked, or does it sound like training? Understanding began to dawn on his face, but continued before he could speak. Human children play something called tag, where they chase and capture each other. They play hide and seek, where they practice stealth and detection. They climb trees, race bicycles, and throw balls with incredible accuracy. They play video games that simulate combat, strategy, and crisis management. Sat back down, his expression growing more serious. By the time a human reaches military age, they've spent 18 years learning to compete, adapt, think under pressure, work in teams, and solve problems quickly. Every human sport is military training in disguise. Every game teaches tactics. Every competition builds the mental flexibility that you saw today. Felt a cold realization growing in his mind. You're saying that all humans are raised like soldiers. Not like soldiers, corrected. As people who can become soldiers when they need to. The difference is important. The ambassador thought about the young humans he had watched that day. Their casual confidence, their ability to adapt and improvise, their natural teamwork. But surely not all humans have these capabilities. Almost smiled, but there was no humor in it. Ambassador, every human child learns to ride a bicycle. Do you know what that requires? Shook his head. Balance, spatial awareness, risk assessment, and the ability to make constant micro-adjustments while moving at speed. Most of your adult warriors couldn't learn to ride a bicycle if their lives depended on it. The implications hit like a physical blow. You're telling me that every human on your planet has received what amounts to military conditioning from birth. I'm telling you that humans grow up in an environment that naturally develops the skills your people spend years trying to teach their warriors. We don't create soldiers in 13 weeks. We take people who already have the basic capabilities and teach them to use them for military purposes. Stood abruptly and began packing again. This changes everything. How many humans are there on your planet? About 8.5 billion, said quietly. 8.5 billion. His mathematical mind immediately began calculating. If every human had the adaptive capabilities he had witnessed today, then Earth possessed a potential military force larger than the combined armies of the entire Galactic Council. But surely, he said desperately, most humans are not interested in military service. Surely they pursue peaceful occupations. Most of them do, agreed. But they could all be soldiers if they needed to be. The accountant who calculates taxes spent years playing strategic games. The farmer who grows food knows how to work in teams and adapt to changing conditions. The teacher who educates children understands leadership and crisis management. Stood and joined at the window. You wanted to know if humanity is dangerous, Ambassador. The answer is yes, but not because we're aggressive or warlike. We're dangerous because when crisis comes, we can respond faster and more effectively than anyone else in the galaxy. And this is normal for your species? Asked weakly. It's the only way we know how to live, said. We've been surviving on a planet full of predators, natural disasters, diseases, and resource competition for thousands of years. The only humans who survived long enough to have children were the ones who could adapt quickly to changing situations. Turned to stare at the human sergeant. You're telling me that your entire species has been shaped by constant warfare. Not warfare, corrected. Survival, but the skills are the same. The ambassador felt like the universe had shifted around him. Everything the Galactic Council thought they knew about military science, about the nature of warfare and soldier training, had just been proven wrong by a species that didn't even realize how unique they were. "What do you want from us?" asked finally. Looked out at the stars. "The same thing every species wants, I imagine. A place in the galaxy where we can grow and learn and contribute something positive." "And if we deny you that place?" Was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I hope you don't, Ambassador, because if you do, you'll be forcing 8.5 billion natural-born warriors to find their own way into the galaxy." The threat was delivered so quietly and matter-of-factly that it took a moment to realize he had been threatened at all. The Galactic Council chamber was filled with tension thick enough to cut with a blade. Representatives from 12 different species sat around the great circular table, their voices creating a symphony of concern, fear, and argument that echoed off the crystalline walls. Stood at the center podium, his pale blue skin almost gray with stress. In his hands, he held the report that would determine humanity's fate, and possibly the fate of the galaxy itself. "The evidence is clear," he announced, his voice carrying across the chamber. "The humans possess military capabilities that exceed our understanding. Every individual of their species has what amounts to intensive warrior conditioning from birth, disguised as childhood activities." Crystal Song of War's musical voice rose above the murmur of conversations. 8.5 billion potential soldiers, all capable of the adaptability we witnessed. This represents a force larger than all our combined militaries. "The question before us," clicked speaker for many voices, "is whether this represents an opportunity or a threat that must be eliminated." The chamber erupted in discussions. Some delegates argued for immediate action against Earth before humans could develop faster-than-light travel. Others suggested isolation, preventing human expansion beyond their home system. A few voices called for acceptance, but they were drowned out by the majority. High Admiral of the Supremacy stood, his massive armored form dominating the chamber. "I have reviewed the tactical demonstrations. These humans fight like no species we have encountered. They do not follow proper military doctrine. They improvise constantly. They treat warfare like a game." "Exactly why they're dangerous," interrupted Counselor from the hegemony. "Unpredictable enemies cannot be defeated by conventional means." "Or maybe," said a new voice from the gallery, "that's exactly why you need us." Every head in the chamber turned to see Colonel entering with a small human delegation. She walked calmly to the center of the chamber, apparently unconcerned by the dozens of alien stares focused on her. "You weren't invited to this session," said, though his tone was more confused than angry. "Emergency protocols," replied simply. "We detected unusual activity on our long-range sensors, something you might want to know about." She gestured, and one of her companions activated a holographic projector. The center of the chamber filled with a three-dimensional star map showing the local galactic region. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring stations picked up these signals," said. Red dots began appearing at the edge of the map, moving slowly toward the galactic center. "We've analyzed the energy signatures. Unless we're very wrong, these match the descriptions of devoid fleet signatures in your databases." The chamber went completely silent. The devoid fleet was the nightmare that haunted every galactic species, an extragalactic force that had appeared decades ago, consuming entire star systems and leaving empty space behind. Previous encounters had required the combined efforts of multiple species and still resulted in devastating losses. "How many ships?" asked High Admiral, his voice suddenly grave. "Our best estimate is 300 primary vessels, plus support craft," replied. "They'll reach the outer systems in approximately 6 months." Panic began spreading through the chamber. The largest previous devoid incursion had involved 50 ships, and that had taken 2 years of preparation and the sacrifice of an entire star system to stop. "This changes everything," said quietly. "Does it?" Crystal Song of War sang, her voice sharp with stress. "The timing is suspicious. How convenient that humanity detects this threat just as we debate their membership." Colonel looked directly at her. "You think we're making this up? Our sensor data is available for verification. But while you're checking our math, the Devoid fleet keeps getting closer." Speaker for Many Voices clicked his mandibles rapidly, a sign of deep thought. Previous Devoid encounters required extensive preparation, years of planning, coordination between multiple fleets, careful positioning of resources. "And you lost anyway," pointed out bluntly. "Maybe it's time to try a different approach." "What are you suggesting?" asked. Looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from across the galaxy. "You've spent the last few days debating whether humanity is too dangerous to join your council, but you're facing a threat that conventional military doctrine can't handle. Maybe what you need isn't more conventional forces." "Explain," demanded High Admiral. "The Devoid fleet doesn't follow normal tactical patterns," said. "They adapt constantly, use unpredictable strategies, and counter conventional responses almost immediately. You've been trying to fight them with careful planning and standard procedures." She gestured at the holographic display. "But humans specialize in fighting enemies who don't follow the rules. We improvise. We adapt. We turn chaos into opportunity." "You're proposing that humanity take the lead against the Devoid fleet?" asked, incredulous. "I'm proposing that you give us the coordinates and see what happens," replied. "You've seen what 8 humans with basic training can do. What do you think 8 billion humans with advanced technology and support from galactic allies could accomplish?" The chamber erupted in arguments. The idea of trusting their greatest threat to a species they had been considering eliminating was almost incomprehensible. But as the debates raged, a small voice from the delegation spoke up. It was the youngest representative, barely more than a larva by her species standards. "They already saved us," she said quietly. The chamber gradually quieted as attention focused on her. "The humans detected the Devoid fleet 3 days before our best sensors," she continued. "They shared this information freely instead of using it for advantage. And they're volunteering to face our greatest enemy without asking for anything in return except membership." High Admiral leaned forward. "What do you propose, young speaker?" "Maybe," she said carefully, "being dangerous isn't the same as being an enemy. Maybe what makes them dangerous to us could make them useful against our real enemies." Found himself nodding slowly. The logic was sound, even if it went against every diplomatic instinct he possessed. "If we agree to this," he said to Colonel, "what exactly are you proposing?" Smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. "Give us membership in your council, share your technology and resources, and in return, humanity becomes your rapid response force. When something impossible happens and conventional solutions don't work, you call us. And if you fail, then you're no worse off than you were before," pointed out. "The difference is, when we fail, it'll be while trying something new instead of repeating strategies that already didn't work." The vote was closer than anyone expected. In the end, it wasn't fear of humanity that swayed the council, but fear of the alternative. The Devoid fleet was coming whether humanity joined the galactic community or not. 6 months later, Ambassador stood on the observation deck of a human starship, watching as the combined human and galactic fleets engaged the Devoid forces. The battle was unlike anything in galactic history: chaotic, improvised, and constantly changing. Human fighters dove through Devoid formations in patterns that should have been suicidal, but somehow worked. Human commanders coordinated with alien captains in ways that violated every principle of fleet command structure, but achieved results. When the devoid fleet tried to adapt to standard galactic tactics, the humans changed approaches completely. When the enemy countered their new strategy, the humans abandoned it and tried something else entirely. It was maddening, terrifying, and absolutely effective. Beside, Sergeant watched the battle with calm satisfaction. "You were right," the ambassador admitted quietly. "We spent thousands of years perfecting our warriors." Nodded, "And we spent thousands of years perfecting our ability to perfect warriors. That's the difference." The devoid fleet broke after 4 hours of combat. For the first time in galactic history, they retreated instead of fighting to the last ship. As the human fleet began rescue operations for damaged alien vessels, realized that the galaxy had gained more than just powerful allies. They had gained something unprecedented, a species that could win impossible battles by refusing to accept that they were impossible. And somewhere in the back of his mind, wondered what other impossible things humans might accomplish, given enough time and opportunity.